Warrior Corner briefing on the unified network enabling decision dominance. Today's presenters are Major General Thomas Pugh, HQDA G6 Director of Networks, Services and Strategy, Major General Christopher Donahue, Commanding General 82nd Airborne Division, Major General Robert Collins, PAO 3CT, Brigadier General Jeth Rey, Director, Network Cross-Functional Team.
Can we go ahead to the next slide? So good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's Warriors Corner. We're privileged to actually be the first act that follows the chief, but I think what you'll hear in our discussion today is directly in line with his discussion during the luncheon and awards ceremony. But thanks for y'all for attending, and I'm going to very quickly go through just an overview of the Unified Network Plan, and then pass it on to my teammates that I'll introduce before they come up, who will actually lead the majority of the discussion. So last week, the Unified Network Plan was actually approved and officially published, and then General Morrison introduced it yesterday in his discussion points. And so I'm just going to very quickly just hit a few of the key highlights of the Unified Network Plan that we think are important. First and foremost, the Unified Network is the two in sensor to shooter. And so, without that, the Unified Network from the tactical edge all the way back to the enterprise, in the way that we intend to fight in multi-domain operations, there really is no sensor to shooter. It's about being able to integrate and operate, simultaneously and seamlessly in all domains, in all geographies, across all the different warfighting functions, and being able to provide that capability to the Army. The Unified Network is about a data-centric Army. And so it provides commanders at the tactical edge the needed reach back to where most of the data stores are actually not only just stored, but also processed. And so provides them the reach back into both national and enterprise capabilities at the point of need. And so, very, very important. The Unified Network is not a single modernization effort, which is really extremely important. But it's a concept about synchronizing multiple, extremely complex, as most of you know, extremely complex modernization efforts based off of common requirements and common capabilities. So based off of common transport, common compute, common standards for compute and store, the common operating environments when it comes to the networking, and then most importantly, from a networks perspective, common unified network operations capabilities so that we can command and control the network. And so it's not a single modernization effort, but being able to synchronize all those together. It's about being able to secure the network, and it's also about, which is probably the most important thing, it's about the workforce, both the military and the civilians, that will actually operate and maintain the network for our Army. And so that's very quickly the Army Unified Network, and that's what you'll see in the Unified Network Plan that was published last week. On the chart behind me, there's a lot of information that's on the left, and so we have the pleasure of having General C.D. Donahue from the 82nd Airborne Division, who's going to start off and really lead the discussion and talking about, from a warfighter's perspective, what he really requires from to become a data-centric commander that's able to achieve, decision dominance. And so he's going to talk to us about that. And then General Jeth Rey, who's the current network CFT lead, will actually come and talk about a little bit about what he's doing today, but more importantly, what he's done in his last two jobs, most recently as a CENTCOM J6, and then working in the Indo-PACOM theater as a brigade commander prior to that. And then Rob Collins, General Rob Collins, that many of you know, who is the PEO for C3T, will actually talk to us about where we need the unified network to start, which is at that tactical edge with some of the capability sets that will eventually spiral up into the enterprise. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to General Donahue.
Hey, the first thing is General Murray and I talk about the network and others, whether it's my boss, General Kurilla, et cetera. The one thing about the network is, and everything we're going to talk about is, there is no endpoint. There is no ultimate place you're going to get to. This is a constantly developing and evolving and improving if we're doing it the right way, whether it's the network, data, how we're doing mission command systems, everything else. So I think that's the one thing you're just not going to pick a point and get there. You know the direction you want to go, but you're going to constantly be evaluating and whatever new technology, whatever new capability, whatever someone else comes up with, you're going to want to be able to morph and change to that. So I think that's the first thing to remember. As we go through this process, the network. As an original CFT director, day one when we actually all got in the room for the first time, everybody universally said the network is going to be the most important thing. Because if you don't have the network, you're not going to be able to do anything that we really stress that we're going to have to do. And then the next thing, just talking about data. I mean, everybody talks about data all the time now. And we're now at the point where we're actually executing data. So I think if you look across, whether it's 18th Airborne Corps, AFC, the 82nd, other formations, we now have tech data teams. We now have, CTOs. All these things are starting to happen. So that's the next thing, is that we're actually starting to execute. So the next thing is say, okay, well that's great. What do you really mean by that? I would just tell you three events that just recently happened that talk about where we're at, but also what we still need to improve. So for this formation, in the last, we'll call it 9 months, we've executed three things. One in EUCOM, one in Indo-PACOM, and then obviously our most recent operation in HKIA. Universally, the one thing that jumps out continuously is the need for data. We have to get our data straight. I can give you, whether it goes back to our most recent warfighter or anything else, and it's just not intel data, it's all types of data. Logistics, operational, intel, all that data has to be able to aggregate, as we call it, into a single pane of glass so a commander can make a decision. Commanders own data. Nobody else owns data. And that has to be a cultural change that we do. So again, as you look across, I can give you all kinds of examples of where we need data. And it's just not about operational stuff either. We're also working with Army Futures Command about how we're making our people better and the things that we're using with data to make sure that we do that. A lot of incredible things are going on there. But one very simple thing, and again, this is combined. The chief just talked about it. All the various things that we're doing to make sure this is combined as well, but also interagency. Our most recent experience out in HKIA, the State Department had a database of American citizens in Afghanistan. We could not get access to that. We could not put that into our systems. Some other people helped us out to ultimately get us there, but it took far too long to get those type of interoperability. So all those things are extremely important, and again, look forward to your questions. Hey, the next thing, Jeth Rey. I've been working with Jeth Rey on probably everything we're talking about, and we talk about two people that are passionate about that. It's probably Jeth and I. We've probably been working on everything we're talking about for probably 15 years at least. So this is the guy you want to ask all the questions to.
I got it, sir. Hey, sir, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Thanks for the big intro like that. So how's everybody doing out there? Okay, so General Pugh talked about the unified network. I'm going to let you know what the network cross-functional team is doing to kind of tie that in. You heard General Donahue talk about data and how him and I have been working on this problem set for many, many years. And so my vision for how we get to this point, I'm going to try to lay that out for you right now. So from a unified network perspective, and General Pugh laid it out well, it has to come from the tactical edge over. So what I normally talk about is there's a broken line in between the tactical and the strategic environment. And my job is how we're going to close that gap. And there's three things that I'm working on with General Collins and myself are working on three things to try to close that gap. And I learned these things in the Indo-PACOM region when I was there, and also down at CENTCOM. And it really comes down to, in the Indo-PACOM region, it's like, 50+% of the Earth's surface is water, and the transports are either, a satellite transport, underwater sea cabling, or something. But it's just, you have to have a transport in order to get to any information at all. So the challenge was, how do we get systems to be more transport agnostic? And so that's where I really came up with that term, transport agnostic. We want our systems to be able to access, LEO, MEO, GEO. We wanted to access 5G, Wi-Fi. It doesn't matter, but we want our system to be simple and intuitive. Simple like your cell phone. Your cell phone goes from band to band without you ever having to really do anything. And that's exactly how we need our transport systems to be in the future. And with that said, we needed to get to data. Data was big. How do we aggregate it? How do we get our commanders to get it, sense it, and then make a decision off that data? So that's why we came with that data-centric environment. When I was in CENTCOM as a 6th, and I was tasked to close down Afghanistan, it was 20 bases collapsed into 0, really leaving just HKIA on the block. So I went from 100 gigabit of bandwidth to 1.2 gigs for the Army side on HKIA, and then 1.5 for the State Department, like General Donahue just mentioned. But I took the whole network and moved it over the horizon, and it was all mostly across the waters. And so therefore, they had to reach for all the intel data, all the regular operational data, because it wasn't stored in Afghanistan. I had to remove it all from there. So that's where the data-centric environment, we can't take our networks with us anymore. It just won't happen. So we need a transport agnostic and a data-centric environment. But while that data is moving in transit and wherever it needs to go, we have to have a security architecture to really ensure that our data is protected as it moves along. So that transport agnostic, I explained it, the data, I explained it, and that security architecture is really that multi-layer security that we're looking for, that zero trust environment. And General Paul Stanton and I, he's at the CCOE, and he's here in the audience as well, him and I have this conversation all the time. He has architecture that we're looking at right now on what we're going to have for the future and unveil in December of what that future network is going to look like in order to really bring the strategic and the tactical network together to build that unified network. So again, those 3 points are transport agnostic, data-centric, underpinned by a security architecture. And also to get after what General Donahue is doing, my partner in crime, General Collins, will come up and he'll talk about our capability sets that we're working on in Network Cross-Functional Team and POC3T on how we get after and put actual physical products to that. So I'll turn it over to General Collins.
See, even a Steeler quarterback can hand it off to a Cowboy running back here and be successful. So living proof there. Hey, so I think you heard a little bit about the what. I'll talk to you a little bit about the how, and how I think fundamentally we're trying to also relook at how we do the acquisition process in a more open, more adaptable, more agile fashion. And I will say we continue to underscore the future battle space is going to be a lot about robotics, a lot about autonomy, a lot about artificial intelligence. And as you've already heard the leaders talk about, what's going to underpin that is our networks and our data. And probably one of the things I'll underscore with you is through our capability set strategy and through our guiding post of the unified network strategy, we have a significant amount of momentum that we are starting to move forward as we get into speed range convergence. And really the big idea is how do we accelerate the OODA loop and the decision cycle. If you haven't heard a little bit about our capability set strategy, I think we have learned that we cannot have a big bang theory, turn the switch on from a network perspective. It's not affordable, is it not necessarily feasible. So we have looked at an iterative strategy on a 2-year capability set process, how we can look at each phase, what are the conceptual ConOps for employment, what are the requirements that we have that we can document that we need the network and other areas to be able to perform, where is the technology maturity of those capabilities to enable that, and then certainly within this fiscal environment, what's the affordability of that capability. And so those are the 4 criteria we look across each one of these capability sets across 4 major lines of effort. Certainly the unified network, certainly on survivability, interoperability, but as you've underscored by these leaders, convergence. Convergence from a data perspective, also convergence from how we visualize what the data presents us, as General Donahue talked about, from a single pane of glass. Capability set 21, we're roughly about halfway through the fielding. We fielded with the 82nd Airborne. We also recently just touched the 25th Infantry Division as we continue through there, focused on our infantry formations, really moving out, providing that capacity, that expeditionary nature, getting down to the tactical pointing into the spear. Capability set 23, looking at strikers. How do we increase that capacity? How do we look at ability to extend range with some of our space capability from both low Earth orbit, medium Earth orbit, what we're already tacking into geosynchronous orbit, and then really starting to get into the data fabric and how do we continue to collapse those battlefield functional areas. And then in capability set 25, continuing to harden, cyber protect, and starting to get into the analytical aspects as we get ready to move forward. And all that's under the construct of the unified network approach so that we can start to look at what fundamentally works well at the tactical echelon and see where we can scale at echelon and then make sure we have, whether it's common environment, common services, common transport throughout our architecture as already described. The last thing I would leave with you is we're fundamentally driving opportunities for all of industry, large, yes, medium, small, to be able to participate in this capability set initiative. In fact, we have another technical exchange. We'll be talking about the data, the standards that we're starting to drive, not only within the Army, within JADC2, and then also into our coalition partners, but starting to drive the ability of industry to be able to participate and driving not only those elements, but we also have cooperative research and development agreements. And so as we go out and talk with each and every one of you, we really need the best and brightest of industry to come in and make those contributions. And as we look at a open, modular, and standards-based architecture, I think there is more opportunity now more than ever for industry to be able to participate, not only continue to advance and add on new technology, but make sure that we can keep pace with threat. And so with that, look forward to your questions as part of this discussion today.
I'm just warming up the crowd because I know there's lots of questions. So, Jeth, tell us about the network that you're using at PC.
So yes, sir. Currently out at Aberdeen Proving Ground, we have the J-Cell, the Joint System Integration Cell that we utilize out there. And this is a combination of all the labs that come together and join in. And we have a really robust architecture that we've created out there to do experimentation and demonstration, all the technologies that we're actually using in PC21. We're using over 100 different technologies that we're testing out in PC21 now. One of the challenges that we do have as we go along and look at these technologies is, and the learning experience that we have is actually configuration management. And that's one of the bigger things that we're trying to tackle, where our systems are more intuitive, like you said, and when they join the network, we have less configuration management across the board. But that's an incredible environment that you can bring your systems in to test in our J-Cell. And we do have our C5IRS lead here that actually works the J-Cell out at Aberdeen Proving Ground. Anybody else?
Thank you very much. General Collins, there at the end, you mentioned the importance of open, standards-based focus. I'm wondering, given that it seems like a lot of the innovators in the commercial sector have succeeded through pursuing standards-based technology, I'm wondering if any or all the four of you could reflect on sort of how the military and how the Army needs to really leverage those open standards You know, we're in the telecom space, so thinking about 3GPP, which is the global standards body for commercial standards. Often military talks about needing to leverage those standards, but then when it comes to actually doing so, you know, we get the secure, well, it's not secure enough, or what, you know, there's excuses being thrown up. I'd love to hear your thoughts on those standards issues.
Yeah,
Thank you.
No, that's a great point, and I think probably two use cases in particular I think that we're really trying to advance. One, I would say if you've heard about a C4ISR modular and open system suite of standards, CMOS is one in particular, and I would tell you with that one, we're really trying to take a look at transport, and where traditionally we've got a unique set of boxes that may provide an individual capability. Now how can we start to drive that towards more of a modular construct in I'll just use the terms, a chassis that can accept cards, that then uses over a common radio antenna component. And part of what we try to do differently now is instead of sitting back from a government perspective and thinking we're in the best position to drive these standards, we use consortiums, and one in particular is an open consortium we do on CMOS. It's combined not only with industry participation, government, Air Force, other services participate in, and we tried to adopt you know, common standards in those particular areas. I would tell you though, in particular, security is one. We continue to work closely with other elements as we get into great power competition and others, you know, an increased emphasis on ComSec, Transec, and other things, and so that's an area that we continue to work through. So that's probably one area I would tell you that we make sure that we partner closely with industry. This panel here focused a lot on data, and so we spend a fair amount of time talking about the data fabric too, and that's an area where we're trying to adopt a data fabric module, and sometimes I try to say, well, what is it and what it is not? Well, it's not probably the visual layer, and it's not maybe the analytical layer, but it's a fabric, and if we can adopt a reference architecture as informed by industry, and what are the piece modules that kind of go into that? We know we got to bring in data, we got to push data out, we got to store it, we got to persist it, and we got to secure it, and then how do we have a blueprint of which that we can allow industry to collaborate on? And so those are I think some of the things that we're trying to do in partnership with industry, have the blueprint, and then open up opportunities for industry to come back in and to provide us some options, I think is one area where we're trying to do a paradigm shift, if you will, if that's helpful. General Fast.
Since you're desperate for questions, we'll ask two questions, maybe.
You've kind of already addressed this, but when you talk about the security architecture and when we talk strategic competition with China and the work that we're doing in Indo-Pacific and requiring the data to be interconnected, we recognize, this is more for General Rey, we recognize that any type of mobilization effort that we have, it's gonna require not just working with industry, it's a whole of nation collaboration. So from your perspective with the work that you're doing with the CFT, what are you doing outside of industry and the Army, but government, all services, and academia, and public-private sector?
Yeah, it's a good question. So again, my experience in CENTCOM was the mission partner environment is really what we were trying to get after the data environment initially. That's what I really started with. I had about 17 bilateral connections to my partners in CENTCOM AOR, and what I was trying to do was, you know, converge that into working below the cross domain, getting under this secret releasable environment where I can actually share data using zero trust, attribute-based access control, and identity management and credentialing in order to, you know, to get that data to my partners and share it with them. And that's not only just operational data, but this was actually, you know, mission data, intel data, and everything else. So yes, we're working with, you know, all the other services. I was working with all the COCOMs as a COCOM 6 in order to get to one environment where we could actually share data. And so what I bring here to the network cross-functional team, to the Army and the other services, is that if we don't create those cloud instances around the world in order to aggregate our data for a commander like General Donahue to access that data, he doesn't have to go 20 different areas looking for data in order to execute on target and make decisions at the same time. I don't know if you need to add something, sir.
I think the one thing is, we've worked so much with our coalition partners. I mean, just recently when we did Swift Response, the exercise to Europe, and you look at just, to Jeth's point, is ultimately we already do this. I mean, I took a back brief from a Polish, brigade commander on everything that he was going to do en route in a C-17 using the network that they just described to you. So we're already doing these things. It's really now about just how are we actually going to share the information? How do we allow each other to do that? So the progress we're making is there, but now the hardest part, and Jeth just outlined it to you, I won't repeat it, that's probably the most important thing. But we have to be able to do this very quickly, right? These are deliberate things. So it has to be something that you can stand up right away. That's difficult, right, for all the reasons they've been highlighted. And the threats are real out there, and we can't act like they're not. We have to address them, but establish this ability to do it very quickly.
So you talked about how the network is being used for transport, but it's also really an operational capability as well, both in the cyber and electronic warfare arenas. Can you talk about how you're working with those communities as well from a CFT, from a network perspective?
Well, I would tell you, I'll open it up and then turn it over. One of the things that you're probably referring to is just the general area of convergence, not only from mission command typical types of traffic, but also intelligence and sustainment too. And so I would tell you one of the things that we've made concerted efforts are to continue to work with the intelligence community, on the traditional things that we've got, such as Trojan and other aspects, and how do we start to collapse that into the environment. And then most recently, we've got a logistical network, CSS VSAT, we're starting to collapse under the sustainment tactical network. So under the unified network approach, data is just that, data, regardless of what functional element that it supports. I would tell you too, as part of our data fabric construct, making sure that we can harness that data so we can help how it's distributed, and then from our network operations tools and our quality of service, allow commanders the ability through some of their staff functions to be able to weight elements of the network to prioritize based on their mission needs. In fact, one of the things we've done too is work with some network health aspects that really report back to some of these functional users on the state and the health of the network, so such that if it's free, open, and available, and things are functioning, feel free to transition full motion video, other aspects, but in certain areas of the mission where it's constrained, maybe contested, throttle things back. And so I think we're really starting to drive the convergence, how we manage, how we maneuver, because you're absolutely right. It's not just a mission network per se, it's also other elements to include.
And just to, this is like my passion that you're talking about, right? Single pane of glass. If you were to walk into any division, core, TOC right now, and then you throw in mission partner, environment as well, you're going to see 7 panes of glass. And then you're probably going to have your certain classification levels outside the tent, and someone's just running in with a piece of paper or chatting in some sort of chat window, right? Completely unacceptable. And that's really, to me, Project Convergence. Why is the 82nd signed up for it? For that reason, to solve mission command. We have all the pieces. The Chiefs talked about, y'all just listened to them, speed, range, convergence. Without convergence, we're probably not going to get there. So PC-21 is about convergence and getting all these networks, getting all these things. So now a commander, at all echelons, not division, corps, but all echelons, can start to see exactly what's going on as real time as possible. And without that network, it's not going to work either. So getting mission command systems to truly talk about each other, that really gets back to data. How well do you get your data? Do you put it onto a screen? You can share it. And then how fast can your network transport it back and forth? We'll be under contract with Starlink here pretty soon, the next warfighter. All the stuff we learned at PC-21, that April warfighter, we'll be using Starlink we'll be at Fort Polk, 18th Airborne Corps will be back at Fort Bragg, and we'll be bouncing stuff back and forth. And without that, I think it's going to be critical to get to convergence so you can actually see. And then as soon as we fire whatever munition, a Mike 2.6 out of an MLRS, you should see it immediately on your logistics cop. Hey, I just went from 100 to 99. So that now as a commander, you can start to make the right decisions. And then what about BDA assessment? You know, we have all these various windows and everything where we have stuff, but something should be scraping that window and very quickly giving you probably not the most refined, but a better picture of, hey, you want to kill 3 giraffe radars, 3 whatever, doesn't matter. I mean, warfare is warfare, but we'll go with the high-end, you know, Russia or China threat. Hey, what about these type of systems? How many did we actually get? So extremely, that's probably the #1 thing we have to solve, man.
So you heard John Donahue, so that comes down. We do really good at network convergence. We do really good at transport convergence, but what we're not doing well at is data convergence. We have, like John Donahue said in his opening comments, is, you know, data is that's a commander's, you know, situational awareness, that he owns the data, and that's true, but we haven't gotten there yet, where the commander truly owns the data, and that's what we really need to get to. So data convergence is something that I'm going to be pushing as a network cross-functional team director, is that we have to get after that right there. There's going to be, you know, some data that we're not going to converge, and that's understandable because of classification levels and other reasons why, but the majority of our data can be converged.
I completely disagree with him. Everything has to be converged. Right, so I'm I represent the insatiable appetite for everything. So he'll solve it.
So we've actually exceeded our time, right, sir? No? Oh, there's a question over there. Oh,
You got one more for me. Can you talk about the role of the unified network in turning tactical compute into tactical cloud computing, and the role of cloud computing globally for your mission?
That sounds like Paul Puckett, as a matter of fact. Is that Paul Puckett? Well, what I would say is we're working closely with the Enterprise Cloud Management Office, one each director, and in all seriousness, one of the things I would say is really from a consolidation perspective, as General Rey mentions, we're having to carry too much of our data into the battle space in the form of what we would call server, and I would tell you, and even on the convergence, we have servers, whether it be for unclassified, for classified, and even on the intelligence on the high side. And I think there is absolutely an opportunity to where we can, be able to push some of this capability back into the enterprise outside of sanctuary, and decrease the burden on the tactical soldier to be able to manage that. I think, though, just like you deploy into a fight with a 72-hour mission set of water or fuel, you probably need to have some type of wind disconnected, an ability to have a 72-hour set of data and what I'm going to call maybe an edge type of a construct. We have done some tremendous piloting with the 82nd. We've done some tremendous piloting with Randy Linneman down at the 101st. And I tell you, they are starting to really turn the paradigm of where we think we can find that balance of what we keep minimalistically forward from a data perspective and all else keep up in the cloud. So I think that has been tremendously helpful. I think we have a vision to where we can, only by exception put that down to the edge and then be able to reach back through that transport agnostic capability, making sure that we keep that wrapped into cybersecurity. So I think that's been helpful. And then have a common set of DevOps tools in a common environment that we could rapidly spin as General Donahue thinks through things that we could never imagine, back in the Force Generation facility, to be able to develop those, put back into the marketplace and allow other soldiers. So that's kind of the big idea, and really trying to where we're pushed.
I think you get one more question. I know General Rey and General Donahue addressed what they're learning from Project Convergence. General Pugh, General Collins, could you tell us what you're doing with the Project Convergence lessons learned and taking it to JADC2?
Yeah, I'll start, and maybe I'll just hit two things and probably pile on what General Donahue and General Rey mentioned. He talked a little bit about configuration management. I would tell you one of the things that we're learning about is just the sheer amount of unique message sets and sheer amounts of translation that goes out on across the battle space, and that's whether you're talking an Intel TIDAT, a fires thread, or an Intel message that has to go across. And some of these translators are phenomenal. However, I think eventually we want to get to some standards base to be able to share those threads, geospatial data, common operational PLI, and do so in a manner that doesn't require translators. They require middleware, they would incur latency. And so I think that we've been able, tackling the data problem is like boiling the ocean, but I think Project Convergence has allowed us to narrow, what are those key threads that we need to focus in on from a data perspective. So I'd say that's probably one thing that we're folding back in so that we can start to push out in our next deliverable capability. I think the second thing is when you start talking about transport agnostic pace and alternate plans, we've done a pretty good job on the terrestrial network. We're starting to really leverage space, but we mentioned too the aerial layer. We've probably got a lot of network thickening options that we can do. In fact, we've got some aerial layer aspects that I think we've pushed out to Project Convergence. We're learning how do we can get to multifunctional payloads that are out there on aerial platforms. Yes, they're doing weapons. Yes, they're doing ISR. They can also give a residual benefit on communications. And so you fundamentally have to think, when you have the advantage node syndrome, a little bit differently how you employ that. But I think those are probably two things that as we head out to the desert, there are many things we're watching. That's probably two specific areas we're watching, and how do we nest those within the overall unified network strategy and our iterative Cape set development, if that helps.
And ma'am, I would just add that one of the lessons that we have seen truly that we really kind of did expect is that our networks are extremely complex. And so there's the project convergence as we're getting after, all the different tasks and the capabilities there. But there is, in phase one of the unified network plan, setting the unified network hinges on really convergence of just about everything. It hinges on transport convergence. It hinges on data center collapse and data center convergence, so that we can actually not only maximize the investments that we've made in cloud, but also make the right investments in any on-prem data center capability that we may have. It's about domain convergence. There are 60 plus domains in the enterprise, the equal number on the tactical battlefield as the forces maneuver. And so we've got to be able to collapse those. And those domains include, also, converging the MI domains up to a certain security level onto what we would call the Army's network. And so there's that other convergence portion that is key to really realizing the unified network. It's going to reduce the complexity so that we can then deliver the capabilities at the point of need. And now we have actually reached our time limit. And so thanks for y'all's questions.